What is definitely not a sign of intelligence but people think it is? Public speaking. Some people can sound like they know what they're talking about, but really don't have a clue. We have a guy at work who really has a knack for coming across as knowledgeable on any given subject when in fact he is absolutely clueless. Often when he gets transferred from place to place, he initially is trusted with tasks relevant to his job description, but once people realize he has been messing up constantly, then he needs to be supervised quite heavily. This is a job which relates to safety massively as well. In the same vein, interpersonal skills. I know some very intelligent people that are awful with others. If you can pull off glib, you'll seem intelligent to many. Being into nerdy things. Plenty of stereotypical nerds are idiots. Seriously. I know a guy who thinks he is a genius because he watches anime, collects Funko Pops, and plays MTG. He is an absolute twit who wouldn't be able to tell you the difference between a noun and a verb. He is the type of person who will try and argue that math is subjective because someone just made it up. Sounds like he needs to have the difference between nerd and loser explained to him. We've tried. He told me I'm not a real nerd because I don't enjoy anime. I am an embedded software engineer who writes kernels and drivers for custom operating systems. I also help design proprietary boards. Apparently though, according to him, being a bookworm and someone who actually enjoys learning does not make one a nerd. He believes being into counterculture pop culture is what makes one a nerd. If only I knew that as a kid. I'd have gotten picked on so much less, as I was not into the pop culture of underground countercultures, and thus not a nerd. Counterculture. Anime is literally mainstream now. In fact, nerd culture as a whole has kinda gone mainstream. In my mind, nerd is academic and geek is cultural. So nerds are smart but geeks are just normal people into something. Conclusive answers to subjective questions. Also simple, definitive answers to extremely complex questions, even objective ones. I had one of those weirdly passionate history teachers in high school who said something like, "Never trust someone who says they have a simple solution to a complex problem." I can't remember if he was quoting something, but it has always stuck with me as good advice. For every complex problem there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong. H. L. Mencken. A simple solution is usually one that hasn't been properly scrutinized yet. That whole story about NASA spending all that time and money on a ballpoint pen that works in zero gravity, while the Soviets brilliantly used a pencil, turned out the friction of a graphite pencil tip against paper in an oxygenated environment is a major fire hazard. USA. USA. I encounter this all the time. I'm a trainer. In our presentations we put together vague scenarios to help people think through situations. In many of these there is no right answer, and there can in fact be multiple correct answers. It's always a sign of trouble when someone feels the need to constantly defend their own conclusion when others are presented, even when I explain the concept of multiple equally valid paths. Like my guy, other people's opinions are not an attack on your own. Being able to solve a Rubik's Cube. I say that as somebody who loves the thing. I have one in my backpack. If I want someone to think I'm smart, I pull it out and casually solve it. But then I tell them that being able to solve a Rubik's Cube means only that someone once had a few weeks to practice solving a Rubik's Cube for a few hours each day. I had a manager that had one on his desk. He would solve it during meetings, while keeping up with everything that was going on. He loved it when he could solve it right as he was needed to weigh in, like he had timed it perfectly. I suspect he did. It was a pretty good power move. He was incredibly smart and never pointed it out or even mentioned it while in a meeting. He never got off topic and never acted like it was something that made him smarter than anyone else. Honestly, kinda a boss move. It gave whatever he said some gravitas. He totally did that on purpose. I was in the military and I did the same thing. Important events where we'd have time to wait, bust out the cube and solve it in front of people. I got myself in with higher-ups and some great gigs just by making people pay attention to me and then actually being clever enough to make them want me on their team. Certainty. People who are actually intelligent are aware of how much they don't actually know, so they tend to choose their words carefully and couch their responses with caveats. Less intelligent people perceive this as uncertain or lacking confidence. I had to train myself to use fewer caveats at work because me saying I can probably do this unfamiliar task that I'm only 98% sure I'll be able to figure out is perceived as less reliable than this other person saying they can definitely do it, except I know they have a 20% failure rate, or do it so poorly it then falls to someone else, i.e. me, to clean it up. And yet I still regularly find myself thinking, maybe they do know how to do it this time. Exactly. The intelligent ones may be seen as slow because they had to actually think about an answer rather than instantly parrot the programmed response. I made the mistake of sharing that I went through 100 books one year and people were so damn impressed. Like 99% of those were fantasy books. Literally just bedtime stories for adults. Good stories, but still. Chill, people, this is not the sign of superior intellect that you think it is. Maybe not intellect, but I bet your vocabulary is decent. My daughter is 2 and she calls any non-picture book a book about words. The other day, she grabbed the bell jar off the shelf for a bit of light reading. She sat in a chair for like 5 minutes just carefully looking at the pages like she was reading. Then she just said, "Dad, I don't know how to read." Being rich. Wealth can also make you dumb. My ex grew up in a very rich family with a gardener, a driver, and various household help. So there were all kinds of normal, everyday tasks he never learned how to do, and his common sense was near zero. As a grown-ass adult, he still calls a handyman to bang a nail into an exterior wall to hang up a thermometer. And he thought it was time to replace a stove that was working perfectly well when the little digital clock on it crapped out. It also took a long time for him to get past his family's notion that when shopping for an item you should automatically pick the most expensive one because it's the best out. There's nothing like being forced by necessity to try to figure out how to fix things because you can't afford to call a repair person for every little thing. Doing things with your hands is so good for your brain. This needs to be higher up. So many people assume the wealthy are smart because they are wealthy instead of because they came from money in the first place. And the opposite is true as well. Poor doesn't mean dumb or lacking of intelligence. It's such an unfortunate stereotype. At least that's what I keep telling myself. Having an answer to every question, never saying, "I don't know." Saying, "I don't know," followed by, "but I can find out," is a sign of real intelligence. I think a lot of people misconstrue confidence, quick speaking, and a loud voice with intelligence. It's almost always a show. It's really weird how American culture glorifies that behavior while slower, more calm and thoughtful speaking behavior patterns are ignored or just seen as weaker. That's just my perspective though, completely anecdotal. My favorite quote: "Never mistake confidence for competence." Being so strongly opinionated that you never budge on a topic in a debate, or change your mind about things. Yet changing your mind when confronted with new evidence or circumstances is seen as an intellectual shortcoming by most people. Add to that the amount of people that live in online echo chambers and it's almost grounds for dismissal from one's social circle. Indubitably, it is, without a shadow of a doubt, an undeniable truth that manifests itself most clearly and unmistakably when an individual chooses to employ excessively wordy, elaborate, and prolix language, replete with an abundance of unnecessary and superfluous verbiage, in order to articulate and convey their intended point or message. Why waste time say lot word when few word do trick? The ability to memorize. Having a good memory does not reflect true intelligence. Trivial knowledge. I have known people with large, trivial knowledge base, but can't understand nor perform simple logic. Intelligence will largely depend on a combination of curiosity, logic, open-mindedness, and what one chooses to learn. One could hold all the puzzle pieces, but if you can't put them together, then you're kinda useless. I like this Neal Stephenson quote on the subject. "The difference between stupid and intelligent people, and this is true whether or not they are well educated, is that intelligent people can handle subtlety. They are not baffled by ambiguous or even contradictory situations. In fact, they expect them and are apt to become suspicious when things seem overly straightforward." Neal Stephenson, The Diamond Age, or A Young Lady's Illustrated Primer. Expensive degree. People whose entire personality is based on being contrarian and or overly critical. Taking issue with everything under the sun doesn't add any weight or make you seem profound. You're just fucking predictable and boring. Parroting anything, People think because they took the time to Google how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop, that means they're big-brained. I love it when people post their IQ showing they're in the top 80-90% and think that's good. Being good at chess. A lot of people associate good chess players with intelligence, but in reality being good at chess has a lot to do with memorization and pattern recognition. Even the top chess players in the world admit that their ability to play chess at a high level isn't an indicator of their true intelligence. Talking down to people about a subject you know they are not actively studying, devoting a life to. The smartest people in the room are ones who will happily dumb things down so anyone can join in with thoughts. Stephen Fry, British chap, is the absolute king of this. The man knows so much, is super smart and bright, but doesn't try to bombard people with technical terms saved to educate. He will talk simpler to people so anyone watching can follow it. What is definitely not a sign of intelligence but people think it is? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.